Welcome back to another episode of Mailbag Monday, where Chris and I are answering your all of your marketing, data, and AI questions, sometimes questions not related to any of those things. This week, Andre asks, what is your take on putting pricing on your website? we've gone, you know, we've gone back and forth, and I feel like there's no it really depends on what the thing is that you're selling. So if you're selling like, we work with some clients who are e-commerce and they sell physical products like, you know, um, books and toys and, gadgets, whatever. Those things, they're going to be one price and one price only. Sometimes they'll go on sale, sometimes you'll have discount codes, but that is one price. And so I think if the thing that you're selling is static, like a course, like a book, it's much easier to put pricing because the time, the effort, it's fixed. It's a fixed cost. So we have courses. We have our Google Analytics 4 course, which you can find at trustinsights.ai/GA4 course. We put the price for the course on the website because it's a fixed cost. The course is built. You get what you get. You get the course, you get the workbook, you get the trainings, you get a certificate. So I think in that sense, it absolutely makes sense. If you're doing services where you have to think about the level of effort, it's going to be a custom project, you can say, this is my hourly rate. I think that's okay. But I think there's a lot of variables that go into it. So that's harder. So Chris, I've been sort of taking over. What's your thought on putting pricing on your website?
Part of it also is your qualification strategy. Pricing is a qualifier, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
there's certain customers you just don't want to deal with, or you just don't want, your pricing can be a speed bump to reduce that. If you say, for example, our consulting services start at $10,000, and you have somebody on the side that's like, oh, what if they can do this for $50? Nope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that does help provide that speed bump for unqualified customers to not burn up everyone's time. So that's part of it is strategically how overworked is your sales team, right? If your sales team's got a decent lead flow, but they're not overworked and overwhelmed, then maybe you want to accept more leads rather than fewer. And in those cases, having your pricing not be on the website might be an opportunity. That way, because there might be people who also will see that pricing and they're still qualified,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe they're not ready to make that commitment yet without understanding, oh gosh, what am I getting for $10,000, right? Why is it so expensive compared to this kid I found on Fiverr who says he can do it for $5, right? So, I mean, price is a filter, but it is also a relatively poor indicator of quality.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a real simple example. I requested quotes from 3 different vendors to have my front porch fixed and have the wood replaced with composite. 3 different people came out. 3 different people gave me estimates. The same exact work, same materials, replace the decking, all that stuff. $6,000, $9,000, and $21,000 for the exact same work. I'm like, what's the difference between these 3 vendors that, particularly that last one, why is it so much more expensive for the exact same thing? Is their quality of work better? And when I look at the photos of, finished projects that each of these companies have, they all look the same. They all look like the exact same work. And so that's a consideration is if you're putting pricing on your website, are you weeding out prospects who the sticker shock might scare them away?
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're fully qualified. And that's a tough strategy decision. A lot of it has to be done with your sales team to say, okay, well, how is the lead quality? Like if the lead quality is just terrible and you're just getting junk, like, okay, then yeah, maybe it's time to put some pricing up just to really weed out even the window shoppers.
I think that absolutely makes sense. I think about it in terms of how complex is the thing that you're selling. And so, sort of back to so you have, you want to weed out lead quality. Well, if you're just selling something static, like a bunch of books, then you don't really have to worry about the quality of the leads because they're just buying the thing and moving on and going about their day. But if you start to get into a complex thing where it's a static product plus a consultation, plus reporting, plus some unknown level of effort, then yeah, you may want to have a better system of, qualifying your leads, but also that's going to be harder to price because it might look different for everybody depending on what the thing is. And so you run the risk of either, a lot of times what happens is you undersell yourself and end up spending more of your own money to satisfy the deliverable. And so that's also where you get into trouble by putting pricing on your website. So in the example, Chris, that you gave of the three contractors, do you think that it comes down to their own years of experience and therefore they feel justified in charging a higher labor cost? Because the materials are the materials. I mean, that's the fixed cost, but it really comes down to the labor.
It comes down to the labor, and there's also just audience pricing, right? If you are doing work in a specific zip code and you know what the average household income is, or you walk up to the house and you see a certain kind of car parked in the driveway, you might make assumptions about like how much money that customer has to spend. You walk up to the driveway and you see a banged up 2011 Corolla, like, maybe they don't have a ton of money. You walk up and you see two brand new shiny Tesla Model Ys that are, $90,000 each. You're like, you know what? I can add an extra 10 on this quote because they got money. It's kind of like a carnival barker, the expression they call it, peeking the poke, where, at the beginning of a carnival, the ticket gate agent will, as you pull out your wallet, will take a look and mark you and say, like, this guy's got like $150 in cash in his wallet. In fact, at old carnivals, you'll see some people walking around with a little bit of chalk dust on their shoulder because someone else has tapped them on the shoulder with chalk on their hands to mark them as a sucker. They've got a lot of money. Make sure that you hit these people as hard as you can. So there's aspects like that. But to your point, there's a lot of things, particularly in complex tests, where you just don't know the price. If someone came to us today and said, we want a custom fine-tuned stable Vicuna machine learning model, the tuning process, sure, that's relatively fixed. We know what that's going to cost. The collecting the data part and writing the several thousand prompts you need to go with that data and making sure the data is clean and extracting from good sources, that could take weeks, months, depending on how messy a company's data is. So to say that would cost $10,000 or $100,000, it could be anywhere within that range. And we just don't know until after we get, look under the hood and go, wow, look, it's all hamsters in here. That's a big part of the consideration is sometimes the more complex a project is, the more the answer is we don't know until we get in there.
I think if you are being pressured to put pricing on your website, I think it's all about how you position it. You could say things like, projects start at and go up from there. And so you're saying, we have a, baseline cost. And this is the qualifications of what go into you getting that baseline cost. However, as you start adding things on, we clearly state on our website, the cost goes up as you add more things. And so you can put pricing, but it's all about how you position the pricing. If you say this project always costs this much, you are stuck in that price point. You will have a hard time saying, well, you just added on 6 things. So it's, you add 6 zeros. Customer's going to push back and be like, that's not what that says. And so
exactly.
Yes, put pricing if you need to, but make sure you are doing a CYA so that you can alter the price if and when needed.
I love pricing begins at, right? It's
pricing begins at.
Right. Like this vehicle, starts at $37,000. And then there's, we're used to that language. Buying a car, we're absolutely used to that language. I think that's the way to go. If you've got thoughts about pricing that you want to share, pop on over to our free Slack group, which starts at $0 and remains at $0 to be a member. Go to trustinsights.ai/analyticsformarketers. And if you would prefer to catch up on old episodes of the show, you can go catch them in our newsletter. Go to trustinsights.ai/newsletter, where we release the previous week's episodes every week.